Not every wrestler can have a final great opponent like Shawn Michaels battling The Undertaker or Austin's final showdown with The Rock. Those are rare exceptions. Many wrestlers have a downright embarrassing final match that will forever be listed in the record books right next to their name. Sudden releases and career-ending injuries often keep wrestlers from being able to say goodbye on their own terms, and others, they just don't know when to call it quits. They keep on going and end their career on the independent scene against somebody named Billy Bilderman or Freddie Fox as their last opponent. Legends have more control on how they go out, but often they don't end things the way they should, and it's kind of sad, but it's actually really interesting. Well, I'm Andrew with WhatCulture, and here are the 10 most fascinating final matches of big stars. Number 10, Ric Flair. Shawn Michaels versus Ric Flair at WrestleMania 24 would have been a brilliant way for the Nature Boy to go out. Everyone agrees on that. One of the greatest of all time losing to another all-time great in a fantastic, emotional match was simply the right way to call it a career. But Flair needed some money, so he went to TNA and fought Abyss, and Mick Foley and Jay Lethal. He wrestled 11 matches there and won exactly 2 of them. But his final televised match was against his arch rival Sting on September 12, 2011. They had a great match over 10 years earlier on the final Nitro, but the TNA showdown was kinda meaningless, and Rick probably wishes he could take it back, and just like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, fans wish they could have it wiped from their memory. Number 9, The Ultimate Warrior. In June of 2008, Warrior was offered a ton of money to come out of retirement and battle Orlando Jordan for the new Wrestling Evolution title, because apparently he was the only one capable of handling him. This was nearly 10 years since Warrior's last match at Halloween Havoc 98, which nearly single-handedly killed the entire wrestling business, if you recall. Could he top that disaster? Yes, he did, but that bar was so low that 2 men in their 70s who had never wrestled a match in their entire lives probably could have done it. In Warrior's swan song, his full-on sprint to the ring was more of a jog, and his long, beautiful flowing hair was, well, it was just short and gray. The two put on a match that was pretty damn terrible, if we're gonna be honest here, yet it was still better than that Hogan match. But even more unfortunately, Warrior's post-match promo proved that along with his wrestling ability, his fortune-telling skills weren't that great either when he told Orlando Jordan that he was going to be one of the greats in the business. Warrior, that is just ridiculous. Number 8, Roddy Piper. While we love Roddy Piper from his work in the WWF and the NWA and WCW, he last battled within the confines of a JCW ring. Juggalo Championship Wrestling. In 2011, Piper teamed up with Bob Orton to take on Terry Funk and Mick Foley. It was a really weird matchup. Besides the 4 legends wrestling in front of thousands of people in clown makeup, they all wore shirts to hide their late 40s to late 60s physiques. Instead of being the They Live of wrestling matches, it was Hell Comes to Frogtown all over again. Number 7, Andre the Giant. Andre was a true legend of the wrestling business, but his last WWF match was at a Superstars of Wrestling taping where he teamed up with Haku against Demolition in early 1990. His last match in the wrestling business, though, was in Japan on December 4th, 1992. There, he teamed up with Giant Baba and Rusher Kimura in All Japan Pro Wrestling in the 4th match on the card. He then announced his retirement, and just a couple months later, the cultural icon passed away at the age of 46. It's a shame that Andre never said goodbye to his WWF fans, but he did get to go out in front of a Japanese audience who were also integral to his career. In his honor, everyone should have a peanut for the big guy. Number 6, Bret Hart. Bret always took a tremendous amount of pride in his work, so you can imagine a random Nitro match against his old WWF opponent in Nash was not how he wanted millions of fans to remember him by. But even with everything working against him, he once again carried Big Daddy Cool to a passable match. And what was working against him? Well, it was a massive concussion that he suffered against the hands of Bill Goldberg at Starrcade 99. Instead of taking time off to heal, he stayed active in the ring, which may have been the fatal blow to his career. Yes, Hart did technically wrestle a few matches in WWE after this, but due to the effects of a stroke, he couldn't take a single bump, so it doesn't quite count. Also, some interesting wrestling trivia is that Hart's final match was on the same night of Vince Russo's last Nitro. So just imagine that, 2 legends going out on the same night together. Number 5, Randy Savage. Turning Point 2004 was the second ever 3-hour pay-per-view put on by TNA, which is why they pulled out all the stops to bring in Randy Savage. It had been nearly 4 years since we'd seen the Macho Man in the ring, and he returned to team up with Jeff Hardy and AJ Styles to battle Jeff Jarrett, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash, who were dressed like Elvis for absolutely no reason. Oh yeah, and Savage didn't start the match either because he was kidnapped. It took 17 minutes for him to show up, but this was not the Macho Man we remembered, sadly. This wasn't even Bonesaw from Spider-Man. This was some out-of-shape homeless guy wearing a long-sleeve black shirt to cover his physique. I'm sorry, Macho. In the ring, he threw some punches before just kind of giving up and sitting on Jeff Jarrett for the pin, and that was it. One of the best wrestlers of all time went out in one of the worst ways possible. Let's just all band together and agree that it never happened. Number 4, Dr. Death Steve Williams. In 2009, Williams had his final match in the United States at Asylum Championship Wrestling. The night was built around celebrating his retirement match, but as soon as he came out, you could tell he wasn't well. His head was bald and he looked really frail, which he was because he was battling another round of cancer. The match is depressing to watch. Here was the once mighty Dr. Death, struggling to move and perform any basic wrestling maneuver. There's no way he should have been in the ring that night, but at least he did get the feel-good moment in the end by winning the title and the crowd joining him in celebration. 4 months later, the mighty Williams did pass away, so there's no jokes here. Basically, cancer just sucks. Number 3, Curt Hennig. Mr. Perfect tragically passed away in 2003, but at least he got to go out against a legend. Well, the son of a legend. On the January 8th, 2003 edition of TNA's weekly pay-per-view, Hennig battled Flair in a match. David Flair, you know, the third most famous Flair. And since Vince Russo was on creative at the time, it was an axe handle on a pole match. Ah, damn it. Hennig bragged about taking down Brock Lesnar on the plane ride from hell in WWE on the pre-match promo because TNA didn't give a damn what you said on the mic as long as you were kind of famous. They only went a few minutes in the ring and neither climbed the pole, and Hennig was attacked with an object in a burlap sack because Vince Russo. A legendary wrestler facing a bad opponent in an embarrassing match. This was about as far from perfect as you can get for an ending. Number 2, Yokozuna. In the mid-90s, Yokozuna sat comfortably on top of the wrestling world. He was the WWF champion and had main evented multiple WrestleManias, but due to an increasingly bad weight problem, he was released from his contract. At Heroes of Wrestling on October 10th, 1999, he showed up to battle King Kong Bundy in a buffet battle royal. Maybe it was just a regular singles match, I don't remember. Anyway, due to the high-on-something antics of Jake Roberts, which included taking a snake and putting it by his crotch to mimic a penis, the 2 final matches had to be turned into a tag bout to save the show from further embarrassment. Yokozuna eventually, and slowly I might add, emerged weighing close to 800 pounds. He was the size of opponents Jim Neidhart and Bundy combined, and maybe even Roberts as well, and seriously, that is not hyperbole. The entire thing was a horrible train wreck. It's one of the worst pay-per-view main events in the history of the business, and it was the last time Yokozuna was seen on a national scene because he passed away the following year. Number 1, the Big Boss Man. So I'm gonna cheat a little bit here because we're gonna look at Ray Traylor's second to last match. His actual last one was in Japan facing Jim Duggan, which really isn't all that interesting, but the one before that, it was against none other than the man who haunts nightmares, Freddy Krueger. Someone wrestling as a horror villain wasn't particularly unusual in Japan, as there was also a successful wrestler known as Leatherface with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre gimmick. While we know Freddy can only be killed outside of a dream, we didn't know he was so susceptible to the Boss Man Slam, as that's all it took for the horror icon to be pinned. You know, perhaps in a way this was a strangely fitting final match for Boss Man, because he spent the majority of his career fighting crime, and here he was putting away one of the biggest serial killers of all time. Well, that's the list. Got any other fascinating final matches? Sound off below. Thank you for watching. I'm Andrew with WhatCulture, and you can follow me at Andrew Sojek on Twitter. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more great wrestling content.